Hello and welcome once again to Coming Out with Gabriel Páez. I am your host, Gabriel Páez. Today, I have a special guest. For me, he's a friend and he's been a mentor these past 5 years for me. And he's just been a leader in this LGBT community of Miami-Dade County for the past 25 years. It's Steve Adkins, the President and CEO of the Greater Miami Chamber of LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. Steve, welcome. I've been wanting to have you since the very beginning of my show a year ago, and I still couldn't have you. Schedule-wise was kind of difficult, but I finally made it work out, and so did you, and here we are. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gabriel. It's my honor, and love the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And just appreciate you accommodating me and
hey,
letting us hang out together.
How could I not? You know, I look up to you. So, and these past 5 years working along your side has been great. I knew you from before, just like a hi and bye,
Right.
But when I started working with you, you just were very welcoming. So it's been great to see with and spend some times with you because we've traveled together on business, and you know, so it's important to build those relationships. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. You're now on a new journey, about to start a new journey, which is probably a great journey, you know, and
let's hope so.
You're right. Yes, it will be. I'm looking forward to my journey, starting my journey and you know, eventually. And so tell us about a little bit about Steve. What's Steve doing? We'll talk about, you know, a lot of things. There's a lot to talk about in 30 minutes, you know?
There's a lot to talk about. And, you know, part of this is a bit of walk down memory lane. But we were just talking before we started recording is that, you know, retiring is no easy task. There's a lot of prep that goes into that. And when you're leaving a job that you've been doing for as long as I've been doing it, there's a lot of intellectual capital that you have to expend and share and make sure gets to the right places for the right people who are going to be doing your work and continuing the great work of the chamber. But on top of that, you know, my husband and I are going to go off and do some traveling. And so it's kind of taking care of winding everything down here, preparing for what you're going to be doing next. Certainly the financial aspects of transitioning from salaried to now, you know, claiming your retirement and figuring out how much you have to spend and where you're going to spend it and those kinds of things. And when I moved here 26, 27 years ago, my parents were still alive. And one of the promises that I always made to them was I would spend my vacations going back and visiting my family and spending time with them in California. So suspended pretty much all the other travel in order to, you know, fulfill my family obligations and be a good son.
Wow.
Yeah. So
amazing. I love that.
So anyway, that's all of that's going on right now. And it's
okay.
pretty much been compressed into 2 months. I know and knew this time was coming. And, you know, it was the board's responsibility to find my replacement. Then it becomes my responsibility to make sure that person is not only properly trained, but not left in limbo when they have questions as things come up. So I've made my pledge to Lisette that, you know, look, I'm not abandoning you. Pick up the phone or send me a text. Doesn't matter where I am. As the need arises, I'll be there to help. So.
What's on your bucket list?
You know, that's a great question. And it's something that not only I have, but I've been trying to tell my husband, who has not been a big traveler, think about the things that you want to do down the road, but also the things that you want to do when we're there. Because every one of these cities is like adult Disneyland. You can either stress out and do everything you possibly can in a short period of time, or you can just take it easy and do things as you have time.
Well, you know, at the rate that I'm at right now as a traveler, we are on a very slow paced travel. So I like to go to a city and just really get to know that city and, you know, and share, you know, what it is to have a coffee or, you know, or a tea or whatever it is that they drink there.
Right.
And enjoy it as a native versus, you know, trying to reach so many places. So I can understand on that aspect, you know.
That's our goal. And So once we get into that routine, our goal is to spend at least a month in each place that we want to go visit and be like a local. So I can just see myself getting up each morning and walking to your favorite little place for coffee and just starting the day in a relaxed manner and deciding what you're going to do that particular day. But bucket list wise, my background is Scandinavian, so I have not done that trip. And so we want to do Iceland, Norway, where my great-grandparents were from, Sweden and that area, and maybe take a couple of cruises, go up the fjords.
Fjords,
But
yeah,
that's
that's on the
definitely-
bucket list.
Yep. And my dad retired from Qantas, and my parents went to
Really?
Australia and New Zealand all the time, and that's a place I have not visited. So that's another bucket list. Take the time to do it right.
Right, and when you can,
And when you can. Exactly.
Yes, I was fortunate to have been able to have done it several years ago, just to Melbourne and Melbourne, like how they like to call it, and it was beautiful. I wish I could have stayed a little bit longer and seen more, but it is what it is. And so
You
yes,
do what
I
you
encourage you go to Australia. Qantas, a love airline, great
Oh,
airline.
I know. And it's
Did he fly? Was he a captain?
so
Or
good
ground?
story, and we won't go into great details. So my
Right.
dad was an engineer out of college. He worked in aerospace, got a job with NASA during the space program, like so many engineers. And so we moved around a lot following the construction of the Apollo rocket.
Oh, okay.
And so I got all drawn into, man in space and the U.S. Space program going to the moon. And so my dad did that until they disbanded that program, I think after Apollo 17 or 18. So then my dad, like many engineers in the space program, jumped over to the airline side.
Okay.
And so my dad was at Frontier, then he was at Air California, and then he was at Qantas.
Air California, acquired by American.
That's right. That's right. So we spent a lot of times in the air.
Great.
Yeah.
So growing up, you got to see a lot.
Got to see a lot. We
Thank
lived
God
in
you
a
got
lot
to
of
see
places.
it a lot because you haven't been out.
No, I know. I was my brother and I were lamenting. Growing up, you have 12 grades, and I went to 13 schools. So
Wow.
we did a lot of
That's a
moving.
lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving. So yeah, but I think it serves you
But
well.
I mean, look at you. Look what it turned out.
Yeah.
So now you're moving on. We're at a crossroad right now.
Yes.
Let's do the serious part and get it out of the elephant out of the way. It's all cyclical. How different is this time than others? We'll get through this one, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, that word cyclical, when you look back over our history of dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has all of a sudden become this bad word,
Awful.
it has led to some truly horrific things, all because people don't want to embrace the diversity that exists in the world, the ability for everyone to have a fair and equal place at the table. And so all of a sudden we're at this place again where a certain particular group wants to exclude everyone else from that opportunity. And I think that's really unfortunate. So I think this is where we have to rise up and be vocal, do a good amount of listening, because you can't, in a partisan conversation, be completely partisan, or your voice is not going to be listened to. Yet at the same time, I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of the goals that we had established around DEI when we started this process with our national chamber some 20 years ago. I mean, you talk about the whole procurement land within the Fortune 500 companies out there. I guess it's Fortune 400 now. It's built around diversity and inclusion. It's about everyone having a fair shot at the opportunity that's available within those organizations.
Why do you think they're what scares them so much of DEI? Because they have something that I can't explain it.
I don't know that it's a realistic perspective. So it's hard to answer that question. Most of these edicts or changes that so completely revert back to the other side are out of fear. So if you can create fear within a particular segment that for whatever reason, these people are taking your jobs, these people are taking your opportunity, these people are going to make sure that you don't have a future, you're able to cause alarm, and you're able to somehow engineer change around those kinds of perspectives or perceptions. It's not real, but it obviously resonates with a certain amount of the population to be able to have created an opening door for that particular ideology to come into power. So we, I think, have to keep our
But the message
calm.
is, so full of, lies and distortions and hate and,
But when politics becomes so polarizing, you sometimes don't listen to the other side. I think it's out of these either actions or inactions, and to your point, false truths, that people start to see that that message wasn't as accurate as it was accepted to be when they determined who they wanted to vote for. And oftentimes when you see midterms, doesn't matter how popular that candidate who won is, there's a gradual shift to the middle or a swing to the other side because people realize I was fed a bunch of crap. And we'll have to see how this plays out in 2026 because you have to have viable candidates to vote for who have a different point of view. And so if the
and that's how, we're talking about how Miami-Dade County flipped now to red, and we see the changes in the shift, and we really need to come out and step up to the plate and say, listen, it's either me or no one. So if you see no candidate there, then that's your call to action.
yeah.
And people. There's so many roles and so many positions that are up. We have to find viable candidates in all of them.
Yeah, or look, I'm going to my caveat piece here is that I'm speaking more from Steve Adkins' point of view than the Chamber's. The Chamber is really non-aligned, and we play nice in the sandbox with everyone because we really do believe that it takes a coalition and it takes everyone working together in order to get to where you ultimately want to get to. But from my perspective, the polarizing politics doesn't serve anyone
at all.
And I think it's really important to talk to both sides or all sides and have a very thoughtful conversation about why you feel the way you do and why you think it's a good direction to be taking. To go in and hit someone over the head with a hammer doesn't accomplish anything and certainly doesn't get them to listen.
Well, the other day I was reminiscing of the bipartisan days here locally in Florida when we had the Bob Grahams and the Paul Hawkins, and that race was such an intense race. That was when I first voted, but it was still people were civil to each other and like, to your point, they still were listening to the other side, and seeing, well, what do we have more in common than divides us?
Yeah.
And that's, we were talking about that. I was talking with somebody about bipartisanship, and Florida, and then the other fact that came out was that Florida has been super majority one-sided for the last 30 years. So where is our the other side of that bipartisanship? And that's maybe why we're so polarized right
well, it's
now.
an interesting question because in order to get to that, one party did a better job than the other party of being able to engineer that because it doesn't happen overnight.
No,
and you have a plan
right.
and you're able to accomplish that. I think to your earlier point, we were raised in a society, at least from a political perspective, where the way government was presented was that you have an issue, you discuss it, you may not agree, but if it's important enough and you see that the end result is going to benefit society at large, the people who elected you into office, you'll reach a common ground, you'll change your positions in order to get to a solution that gets approved and then gets implemented. We've lost that completely. It's either one way or another.
Very true.
And we're going to
Very
figure out a way to engineer this around all of the measures that are supposed to be in place to create that thoughtful discussion so things are not rushed into place that will cause future harm.
Right.
And so, historians, that's their job to go back and figure out how we got from A to B. But we need to move away from B.
Right.
And get back to something a lot more
Than we were used to.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, to me, it's not working the way it's supposed to.
So now that you move on, what do you see your legacy as? What do you see that you left behind that you did that you really liked? And
I've been thinking about that, and it's a wonderful question. And I think for everyone who's done something for a while, you want to be able to look back and say, I'm proud of the job that I did, or I'm happy to see the organization get to where we are today. And I can honestly say that. I mean,
Okay.
I think that
Awesome.
in looking at our organization, one of the things that I take a lot of pride in is when out in the marketplace in general, when people talk about organizations they should belong to from a business perspective, we are almost always in that conversation. We and a couple of other general market chambers, it's like, you know what? That's a group that you're going to get business from if you invest your time and your effort into the programming that they provide. You're going to see value for your investment. And so that, to me, is wonderful. The other thing we tried to establish years ago, and I think it's one of the wonderful things about going to one of our networking events, is no one stands alone. That when you come, you're welcomed. We have lots of people there whose job it is to make sure you get introduced around and that you don't feel like the person over in the corner apart
Fish out
from
of
everything
water,
else
like-
that's going on. Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's really important that if you're a community-based organization, you generate a sense of community. And I think
sure.
we've been able to do that. So,
Well, obviously, you've been recognized twice as Chamber of the Year, LGBTQ Chamber of the Year. Last year, you received the award for what year was it? 23 or 24?
we got 19 and 23.
19 and 23. So
Yeah.
try those numbers in lotto and see what happens. But I seen your work, and I've seen how you when we went to a conference last year. I saw how people came to you. So you really have networked not only at the local level, but you've also built these great relationships nationwide, globally. And, tell us about a little bit of those. You have great friends across the world, not just because you traveled so much earlier on in your life, but really it's because of the work that you've been doing, not just locally, but.
Well, thank you. And it's been wonderful to experience these things together. I think I have to give a lot of credit to our national chamber, to Justin Nelson and Chance Mitchell, who started the NGLCC back in 2004 or more or less. And there were a few of us who had been around a while. So I was on the board of the chamber at that time, but there were a lot of chambers, LGBT chambers, that started back in the 70s and 80s. And so NGLCC was learning from them as much as trying to establish this national presence. And I think going and doing the work and being available to the other organizations when they need somebody that they can rely on for, just general information. How do I do this? How do I, put my programming together? How do I work with my members? How do I do whatever it might be? We became a resource for all those other organizations, and just staying with it gave us a sense of credibility, but also a focus, that people looked at what we were doing and saw that we were doing some good things down here and wanted to take some of that information or emulate what we were doing.
So you've been here with us for 25 years locally. 2009, 2008, Maddie Bauer gets elected as mayor of Miami Beach. She then puts together a group of community members, and the first Pride comes out in 2009, correct?
We brought that back in 2010. We started working on it in 2009. And, that was an interesting time. If you remember back, I mean, a lot of us have made it through some really interesting economic downturns.
That was a kind of a cyclical point.
It was a really interesting part for our chamber too, because the market downturn was significant. We were looking for a new home because our lease had expired at the other place and we weren't going to be renewed. They had other plans. So we were looking for a new place. We were able to work with the city of Miami Beach and get our new chamber home and visitor centers opened. First chamber-run LGBT visitor center in the country. And we were able to do that with the help of the city of Miami Beach. And so at that time, Maddie really had a lot of support from the LGBT community in her win as Miami Beach mayor. And I think out of her just desire to want to do something really thoughtful and important, legacy-wise for our community, we had told her this is something we saw as a Miami Beach project. And she stood behind us and she put the resources of the city behind having Pride on Miami Beach, as well as some financial capital that we were going to need in order to do it. And so we hired Cindy Brown to be our first.
Wow, Miss Brown.
Yeah,
Give her applause.
Yeah, Cindy Brown.
Cindy Brown.
She was our first contractor. She helped us put that
contractor. On. Awesome.
And it was a great board. And we now are into our 16th year.
Yes. It was a great time this year. It wasn't so hot this year.
It wasn't so hot, but Pride Parade started as a protest.
Of course.
And this year had a lot more of that flavor than years past because of the, kind of the anti-trans posturing and legislation and things like that. So I think there was a lot more of our community who wanted to get out there and say something meaningful.
I'm sure we suffered some corporation funding, lack of funding this year here. It's an issue that is a lot of the other prides that are experiencing a June Pride Month. During the month, I've already said that they've experienced high corporation withdrawals of funds.
There was some. I don't have specific names.
Right.
But I think there was about 100. Well, I want to say the number. I think there was probably about a 10-15% fall off in terms of corporate support from a dollar perspective.
Correct.
And I think that's playing out nationally, some places a little bit more than others. What I will tell you from our perspective, from the corporate side, most of the companies that we've dealt with, and certainly this is reinforced by our national chamber, it's now called something different than DEI, but those companies have not stepped back from their commitment to diversity, to inclusion. And I think that's the word that most people are using as kind of a replacement noun, or verb, is inclusion. Inclusion, everyone is welcome to the table. We want to make sure that we're doing business with a society out there that represents our client base. And so they're not stepping back from it.
Okay, but it forces us to readjust and continue the fight. And, so it's like the fight's never over, and it's like we thought that we had won like a major victory when marriage equality came around. And I just felt that that was our downfall, not that it was our downfall, but that was going to generate the everything that we've seen in the past couple of years. And it played out very well, Yeah. So, the fight continues, this is not something that,
No, the fight continues, Gabriel, but I will say this. Oftentimes when such a force comes into the market, you have to kind of take a step back and see what really is going to happen.
And let it happen?
No, in order to determine how you're going to react to it. Because sometimes it takes care of itself and there really isn't anything you have to do, rather than just say this is really bad and we have to correct that before it becomes
So where are we right now?
I think we're seeing a backlash. We're seeing people talk about it's gone too far, or it's just it's not consistent. It seems to be emotional rather than really political or even strategic from a policy standpoint. So there really isn't any policy behind all of this. So I think it happened so quickly. It happened in such a rush. The effects are really terrible, and we're seeing the courts push back in almost every instance where there is a fight over that decision to change things. But the point is, it's not necessary to wait until 2026 in the elections to see what happens. You have to engineer
for sure.
that process. And you have to talk about it, and you have to start talking about alternatives and what are we going to do in terms of a response to what we think is not going to work or is not working right now. But on top of that, you don't want to cause more problems by reacting so quickly to something you don't see clearly.
But it forces us to readjust and,
of course,
and always readapting and, and taking it from a different angle. So, it's just,
Well, we were talking about this earlier about the fear of if this goes so far or actually does become the law of the land, it's going to be a much more difficult process to step back from that and change it again. So
right.
you got to stop the bad from really happening before
the bleeding.
Yeah.
On a more serious, less serious note here, we're gonna shift, and I'm gonna start sort of like playing a game with you. See what your favorites are.
Okay.
Not what is. It's not Jeopardy, but just Steve's top pick.
Okay.
So most romantic place in Miami-Dade County. Or Miami Beach.
Oh, you know what? That's
or one of your favorite.
I love places where you can sit down and either see the sunrise or the sunset. So certainly the beach in South Beach for a sunrise is like absolutely
one of my favorites.
Absolutely
one of my favorites.
Gorgeous. And I love Fairchild.
Nice.
We've had a membership there for a long, long time, and it's just the most beautiful place to go have a picnic, to see really some of the most beautiful, landscaping you'll ever see.
Yeah,
is down that way. So, and the drive down Cutler.
Oh, Cutler's a gorgeous road.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's very, very unique to Miami. When you think
Isn't
about
it?
It really
you
is.
don't feel like you're in Miami when you're going through Old Cutler. You feel like, and if you put the windows down, it's even a little bit better.
It's just gorgeous. So those are really two.
The other day, a friend of mine not too long ago, when I first got my car, he's like, "Let's go cruising." And I was like, "Oh my God, I haven't gone cruising in so long." And we ended up with the route that we took was Old Cutler.
I know.
Because it was, so we reminisce that way.
It is. It's beautiful, and it's kind of the tropical feel that you want to get. When you're down here, it's the same thing in Coconut Grove, and when you go to Vizcaya, it's like you enter a different world.
Totally,
Vizcaya, yeah. And you get off the freeways, and you get into something that just
and you listen to the
makes you calm.
Nature.
Yeah, it's just beautiful.
So, where's your favorite restaurant?
Oh, Diego and I are pretty low key when it comes to going out.
You're very private though.
Yeah, I love Joe's, but you know what? One of my favorite restaurants is a fish called Avalon. It is an old favorite on the beach. You'll see there's beach theme here because we lived on the beach for a long, long time. But the food is consistently amazing. We love seafood, and it's just
and their key lime pie, it rocks.
Yeah, it's good, but it's really good, and you get a chance to just sit there.
And the ambiance is pretty good.
It is, and it's far enough down on Ocean Drive that it's more relaxed, and it's really enjoyable. But there's so many great restaurants in this town. But that's kind of
yesterday I went to Chef Bernie's.
Yeah.
And oh my God, that's like a little
gem.
It is. I mean, I got to give a plug out to my brother there.
But you have to know where you're going.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because, down the, and they're like, make you check in and, but what a great little spot.
It's a great little spot and very reasonable. So, there's a lot of expense involved in going out nowadays. So,
totally.
You want to have your favorites where it doesn't, kill the whole restaurant pocketbook, for the month. And that's one of those places you could go to, and it doesn't kill your budget.
Let's give me a final word. What would you like to see? I leave the floor to you, and we check out, and until next episode. But
I tell you, Gabriel, the best part about what I've done the last 25 years are the friendships, the people that we've met and will have in our life for the rest of our lives. And so, Miami is near and dear to us, and it'll always be, one of our homes. But the people, that's what makes life worth it, are the people that you have in your lives and the experiences that we've had and the friendships that we'll have for years and years to come.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for finally making it time, and
I'm glad it worked out.
And on this, as we kick off June Pride Month,
Happy Pride.
Right, Happy Pride to everybody out there. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us today.